The war between the humans and the Solari had finally come to an end. After years of destruction across star systems and battlefields filled with ash and fire, peace had returned to the galaxy, but not without scars. Both sides had lost much soldiers, had fallen cities had turned to dust, and memories had turned into shadows among all the chaos during the final evacuation of the Royal Solari Palace, deep in the mountains of the planet. I write as something had gone terribly wrong. The young princess, Lyra, daughter of the Solari Queen, had gone missing. No one noticed her absence until the ships had already left orbit. The royal guards had scattered in the confusion, and the Queen herself had been injured in the blast that tore through the throne chamber. She cried for her daughter, but the palace was already empty and silent. Many believed that the princess had not survived the final wave of attacks. Some said she had been captured. Others said she had been buried under rubble. The Queen, however, refused to give up hope. She waited each day for news, but none came until one evening a weak distress signal was received by one of the human patrol ships orbiting the region. A signal coded in old Solari script simply said, "Hiding scared, please help." When the message was decrypted by command, most officers dismissed it as an old echo or a leftover signal from before the war. But one soldier read it twice, and then a third time, and something stirred inside him. His name was Adam, a human warrior, known not for rank or medals, but for the way he never left anyone behind. He had seen many battles, lost many comrades, and one memory haunted him most. A small child he could not save during an old mission on Earth. Ever since then, whenever someone was in danger, he moved first and asked questions later. Adam stood in front of the high command and said firmly, "I want to go back and find her." Silence filled the room. The war was over, and no one wanted to risk another conflict, especially not for someone the galaxy had already assumed dead. But Adam was not asking for an army. He was only asking for a ship, a map, and a chance. The Queen of the Solari heard about the human soldier who volunteered to rescue her daughter. She sent a message through the fragile peace channel, a simple recording of her voice that said, "If he brings her back, I will never forget what humanity did for us." With reluctant approval, Adam was given a small stealth craft equipped with light weapons, basic supplies, and a single landing route back to Iritis. He was warned that enemy remnants still moved through the ruins, broken droids, mad survivors, rogue patrols. Nothing official, but enough to make anyone disappear if they weren't careful. As he flew through the blackness of space, Adam sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the fading light of distant stars. He had seen so many of them in his lifetime, each with its own story, but this mission felt different, not because of who she was, but because of what she meant. A child lost in the ruins, a mother hoping against hope, a message barely holding together across space. When he reached the atmosphere of Iritis, the sight below was haunting. Once a world of glowing towers and blue lakes, now nothing but ash and silence. The mountains were cracked, the air heavy with dust. The remains of the palace, visible like the bones of a fallen beast, twisted metal and shattered glass stretched across the valley. Landed the ship in a narrow canyon, far from the Vavren old cities. Using the signal from the message to guide him, he carried only what he needed: a pulse scanner, medkit, translator beacon, and his sidearm. He moved quickly through the broken roads, past burned trees and silent monuments, every step echoing through emptiness. But still the signal pulsed, faint and steady. A quiet cry in the dark. Adam's boots crunched over stone and rubble. As he moved deeper into the ruins, the sun of Iritis hung low, casting long shadows across broken statues of kings and scholars once proud, now forgotten. He paused at a wall covered in markings, half-burned but still readable, ancient Solari words, meaning home, protection, light, and he thought how strange it was that a warrior from Earth now searched this place for a child born of stars. After hours of searching, he finally found the source of the signal beneath a collapsed structure near what used to be the royal garden. He crawled through a narrow gap, his hands covered in dust, his heart steady, and then he saw her, small, barely moving, wrapped in a torn ceremonial cloth. The princess Lyra. Her eyes opened wide with fear as the light from Adam's scanner touched her face. She backed away, but had no strength to run. Adam quickly lowered his weapon and raised both hands open and empty, his voice calm and low. He said, "I'm here to help you. Your mother is waiting for you." "I came to take you home." Lyra blinked slowly, unsure, her voice soft and shaking. "You're human." Adam nodded. "Yes, I am, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because you asked for help." Remember, there was silence, then she whispered, "You heard me." "Yes, I heard you, and now I won't leave without you," he said gently. He reached out slowly, not forcing anything, just waiting, and after a long moment her small hand touched his, and he felt it then, not just fear, but trust growing like a flame in the cold. Picked her up carefully, wrapping her in his own jacket, her body light and weak from days without food or rest, and as they stepped out of the ruins, the wind carried the faint sound of metal creaking in the distance, a reminder that they were not yet safe. But Adam looked at the sky and whispered to himself, just a little longer. The mission had only begun, but in that moment something had already changed. Two worlds, once enemies, now connected by a promise and a silent hope that even in war, even after loss, humanity still had something worth remembering. The sun over Iritis was not like Earth's. It moved slower across the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch forever between the broken towers and shattered homes. As Adam carried Lyra in his arms, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, he felt the weight of silence pressing on everything around them. No voices, no movement, only the wind whispering through ruins that once held laughter and light. Lyra was quiet, not because she had nothing to say, but because she did not yet know if she could believe in safety. Her small hands clutched at Adam's jacket as if she feared he might vanish like a dream. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft like a breath through cracked glass. "Are you really going to take me to her?" Adam didn't stop walking, but his voice was steady as he answered, "I gave my word and I never break it. Your mother is alive, she's waiting for you, and I'm going to get you back to her, no matter what." She looked up at him with eyes that held both the innocence of a child and the weight of survival. She had seen things no child should have seen. She had waited in the dark while the sounds of war echoed through the city. She had hidden while fire lit the skies above her palace. She had cried without making a sound because she knew that noise could bring danger. Adam knew that kind of silence too. He had learned it during his first war, when fear taught him how to breathe without making a sound, how to move through rubble without stirring dust, how to stay alive when the world wanted him gone. He had been a soldier for most of his life, but carrying Lyra in his arms now made him feel something deeper than duty. It made him feel responsible in a way that touched old wounds and opened new ones. They moved through the narrow alleyways between ruined buildings. Adam checked the scanner on his wrist. Its screen flickered with faint signals, signs of movement in the distance. Not friendly, not known, most likely leftover enemy droids or broken war machines, acting without orders or reason. They had to move fast. But carefully. Too much noise would bring attention. Too much light would bring death. He stopped near an old transport station. Its metal roof bent inward like a crushed can. He set Lyra down gently and gave her a small nutrient bar. She stared at it, unsure how to open it, so he smiled, took it from her, unwrapped it, and gave it back. "Here, eat slowly. It's not much, but it'll help." She took a bite, and her eyes widened, not at the taste, but at the realization that she was still alive, that someone cared enough to feed her, that she was no longer alone. For the first time her lips curved slightly into something close to a smile. Adam checked the path ahead, his mind already calculating routes, scanning threats, remembering the map he had studied before landing. They were still several kilometers from the extraction point, a hidden zone near the mountains where his ship could land for just a few minutes, no more. The pickup had to be quick or risk being tracked by whatever still hunted in these ruins. Just as he turned back toward Lyra, a distant metallic screech echoed across the broken city. He froze, his instincts kicking in. He moved quickly, pulling Lyra into a shadowed corner, motioning for silence, his hand on the grip of his sidearm, his breath steady as his ears strained to catch the sound again. A patrol droid rolled into view across the street, its body half burnt, its sensors flickering. but still active, its scanning beam sweeping across the ruins, looking for anything alive. Adam didn't move, his heart calm, but alert. The droid paused, turned slightly, then rolled away, its signal fading into the distance. But it was enough to remind Adam that this was no safe journey. He picked Lyra up again, and they continued, now taking longer paths. Avoiding open ground, sticking to collapsed walls and sunken floors, they passed the remains of what looked like a school. With small chairs overturned and colorful murals, now faded, they passed a garden where metal vines had once grown under artificial sunlight, but now hung dry and rusted. Lyra whispered quietly, "Did humans have gardens like this?" Adam nodded, "Yeah, back home. Some people even grow flowers in space." She tilted her head. "Why would they do that? Flowers can't feed you." He chuckled softly. "Maybe not. But sometimes you just need to see something beautiful, even if only for a moment." Her eyes held that thought for a while, then she said, "I used to like the white ones. They looked like stars on the ground." As they continued, Adam felt the weight of time pressing on them, the sun dipping lower, signals growing closer. Something was tracking movement behind them. Not one, but several. The scanner flashed weak red dots following from behind, weaving through the ruins, either droids or worse, perhaps leftover fanatics who refused to accept peace. Adam quickened his pace, but carefully. He couldn't risk making noise. Lyra held onto him tighter, sensing his shift in energy, her fingers wrapping around his jacket as if anchoring herself to the only piece of safety she had left. They reached a broken sky bridge that led across a river of molten waste below. The bridge was half collapsed, but parts of it still held. He sat Lyra down again and tested each step until he found a path, then guided her across, holding her hand every step of the way, each creak of metal echoing into the deep chasm below. Finally, they reached the other side, just as distant signals began to converge on their previous location. They were being followed, no doubt now. They had to reach the pickup zone before nightfall, before the shadows swallowed them whole and the remnants of war closed in around them. As the light faded and the air grew colder, Adam paused near an old tower and looked down at Lyra, who now walked beside him. Though still weak, she had stopped asking if they were safe and started walking without complaint, each step showing quiet strength. He knelt in front of her and said softly, "I'm proud of you, you're brave." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the orange light of the setting sun, and replied, "I'm not brave, I'm just following you because I believe you'll keep your promise." That simple sentence struck something deep in Adam. More than medals or orders or missions ever had he stood tall again, his eyes on the horizon where mountains waited, and beyond them the hope of rescue. He knew it wouldn't be easy, the danger had only just begun, but he also knew that he wasn't alone anymore, and that a world once filled with fire and fear, a little girl's belief, might just be enough to bring them both home. Night had fallen over the ruins of Iridas, and the sky above the broken world was filled with strange colors, streaks of violet and deep red flashing across the atmosphere like wounded stars, crying out from the heavens below those skies. Adam moved carefully through the shattered city with Lyra close beside him, her steps still small but steady, her trust in him now firm and quiet, like the rhythm of her breathing. Silence around them was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that came after destruction, when nothing living dared to speak too loudly, and the echoes of past screams still lingered in the cracks of buildings and the black glass of melted streets. Adam had learned long ago to move like a ghost through such places. He kept his eyes on every corner, his hand always near his weapon. But he also kept glancing at Lyra, making sure her pace stayed strong, her balance held, her eyes alert. They stopped only once to rest in the broken shell of a market hall where long-forgotten goods still sat. Covered in layers of ash, Lyra found a small doll on a counter, its eyes made of tiny gems, one of its arms missing. She picked it up and looked at Adam with a quiet question in her eyes, as if asking, is it okay to keep something that belonged to a dead world? Adam gave her a nod and said, "You can take it. Sometimes holding on to something helps us keep moving forward." She smiled softly, then tucked the doll into her bag and sat down beside a pillar while Adam studied the scanner, the signals that had been following them earlier had disappeared for now, but the map showed they still had nearly 2 kilometers to cross before reaching the mountains and the narrow valley, where his ship would land if they weren't there on time. The ship would leave without them, and there would be no second chance. Lyra spoke after a while, her voice low but steady. Why are you doing this? Not just because you're a soldier. I think there's something more. Adam didn't answer right away. He looked at the ruined ceiling above them, then said, I once failed to save someone, a child, during a mission back on Earth. She was scared, just like you, and I couldn't reach her in time. I promised myself, if I ever had another chance, I wouldn't let it end like that again. Lyra listened without interrupting, then said quietly, but this time you're not too late. Those words gave Adam more strength than any weapon could. He stood and offered his hand. Let's move while we still have some darkness to cover us. She took his hand, and together they left the safety of the shadows behind them. The streets ahead were more open and dangerous, filled with broken vehicles and structures that looked like teeth rising from the earth. Suddenly the scanner blinked again, red lights flaring up from the east side, approaching fast. Adam grabbed Lyra and they ducked into a narrow gap between buildings, crouching behind a cracked wall. He peeked through the gap and saw them. A group of rogue machines, not the kind used in war, but scavenger drones programmed to hunt for movement and sound. After the war ended, they had gone wild without commands. Without purpose, they hunted anything warm, just to follow what was left of their instincts. There were 4 of them, moving on multiple limbs, sharp like bone, with glowing cores inside their frames. Adam waited silently, watching their pattern. They moved in a triangle with one scout circling wide. He knew they would pass if he remained quiet, but Lyra's breathing was quick, her fear returning. He whispered to her, stay calm, hold my hand, I won't let them find us. She squeezed his hand and nodded, her eyes shut tight as the metal footsteps came closer, dust drifting around them like slow rain. Then the machines paused. One of them tilted its sensor toward their hiding spot. Adam's muscles tensed, ready to fight, but just as quickly as it turned, the machine changed direction, drawn by a loud noise in the distance, an old wall collapsing far off in the city. The machines followed the sound, chasing echoes instead of flesh when the way was clear. Adam exhaled and rose. We need to run now before they come back. They moved fast through the narrow alleys, turning sharp corners, climbing over broken pipes and ducking under fallen cables. Every moment brought them closer to safety, and every step felt like it stretched forever. Halfway through an abandoned district, Adam stopped at a wall covered in reflective tiles. They shimmered in the night like strange symbols carved across them. Lyra stared at them in awe. This was a memory wall from before the war. My people used to leave thoughts here, like dreams etched in light. Adam touched one of the symbols, and a faint image flickered to life, a Solari child laughing, chasing stars across a field of blue flowers. Lyra watched quietly, then said, they used to say memories live forever in places like this, but sometimes I think memories hurt more than they help. Adam nodded. Sometimes. But memories can also remind us why we fight so hard to protect what's left. As they continued moving, the ground beneath them shook slightly. Adam froze, placing a hand on the wall. Another tremor, and this time louder, not natural. Something heavy was approaching from the valley side. He looked to the sky and saw small flashes like warning lights. A heavy scout walker, an old enemy machine still active from the war, crawling across the terrain, its sensors sweeping the area. It must have detected something, maybe even the rescue signal. They had to hurry, but going around the machine would take too long. So Adam made a decision. He pulled out a small device from his belt and set it on the ground. Stay here, he told Lyra. I'm going to distract it. She grabbed his sleeve. You'll get hurt. He looked into her eyes and said, if I don't go now, we won't make. I've moved fast, placing decoy beacons along a broken rail line, then activated them, each one giving off a pulse of heat and light enough to confuse the walker. The machine roared, its legs stomping into the earth as it followed the signals away from the valley path. Adam ran back toward Lyra just as the last beacon exploded in the distance, lighting Up the sky with a flash they moved again, this time climbing the ridge that marked the entrance to the valley, Lyra slipping once, but Adam catching her before she fell. The wind grew stronger, colder, whispering through the rocks like a warning. But ahead through the dark clouds, the beacon of the pickup site blinked 3 times, steady and strong. Lyra looked at it with wide eyes. Is that it? Adam smiled. That's home for both of us. Now we just have to survive until we reach it. Behind them, the night was waking up again, machines stirring, wind rising, signals flashing. But ahead there was hope, and for Adam that was enough to keep going. The wind that blew through the narrow valley was sharp and dry, carrying with it the scent of dust and scorched metal. The sky above had darkened into a deep violet, and far beyond the horizon, thunder rolled across the silence, not from clouds, but from machines, heavy footsteps shaking the ground like slow drums, announcing something was coming, something powerful, something deadly. Adam reached the ridge first, pulling Lyra up beside him, her hands gripping his arms tightly, her face pale but focused. She did not cry or ask questions anymore. She understood the danger, and she trusted that he would do everything to keep her safe. Below them lay the extraction zone, a wide flat surface of stone, where the rescue ship was set to land. The beacon blinked bright and steady, sending signals into orbit, but the space around it was too open, too exposed. And the sound of the walker from earlier had not faded, it had grown louder. They moved down the ridge slowly, using rocks and the shape of the valley for cover. Adam checked the time on his wrist device. It was close. The ship would arrive in minutes. But the danger would arrive even sooner. In the distance, he saw the heavy scout walker again, now fully visible, a towering machine with legs like broken pillars and a body made of armor and wires. Its main sensors swept across the terrain, glowing like a red eye in the dark, and beside it moved smaller machines, hunched, crawling, armed with old weapons and cruel intent. Adam knew they had been tracked all this time. He had left false trails, used beacons, and moved carefully. But somehow they had still followed. Maybe the signal of the extraction point had given them the final clue, and now they were coming, not just for him but for the girl he had sworn to protect. He looked at Lyra and saw no fear, only strength, and that made his next decision easier. He pointed to a small stone outcrop halfway between them and the landing site. He told her quietly, "You need to stay there no matter what happens, no matter what you hear. Stay low, stay still. When the ship lands, run to it, and don't look back." She opened her mouth to argue, but he shook his head firmly. "I need you to trust me this one last time." Lyra stared at him, her eyes shining, not with tears, but with something deeper. Then she nodded. Slowly, her hand reaching into her bag, she pulled out the small doll she had found in the ruined market and pressed it into Adam's hand. She said softly, "If I don't make it back, give this to her. Tell her I tried to be brave." Adam closed his hand around the doll and nodded. "You'll make it back, I promise." He helped her crawl behind the rocks and made sure she was hidden. Then he turned and walked toward the open ground, drawing his sidearm and setting a small explosive charge on the ground behind him. He didn't have much left, but enough to make noise, enough to buy time. The walker turned toward the movement, its sensors locking onto him. The smaller machines spread out, trying to flank, but Adam moved fast, drawing their attention with bursts of fire and sudden motion. The first shot from the walker missed but shook the ground like thunder. The second came closer as he rolled behind a boulder, firing back and setting off the charge, which burst in a flash of fire and dust, throwing the enemy off balance for a moment. Kept moving, drawing them further from the ridge where Lyra waited. His shoulder burned from the force of the blast, and his leg bled from a sharp piece of metal. But he did not stop. He remembered the promise he made, not just to her, but to himself and to the memory of the one he couldn't save. He climbed a broken column and fired from the high ground, taking down 2 of the smaller machines. The walker fired again, and this time the shot hit the edge of the platform, sending Adam flying backward into the dirt. His weapon slipping from his hand, pain flared through his ribs, and he coughed hard, trying to stand again, even as the sound of metal footsteps grew closer in the distance. High above the clouds, a new sound began to echo, a low rumble growing Louder and clearer, the rescue ship was arriving its engines, cutting through the silence, its lights piercing the sky like the sun rising over a dead world. Adam raised his head and saw it descending fast toward the beacon, and then he saw her, Lyra. Running from the ridge straight toward the ship, her figure small but swift as wind, her eyes locked on the ship, her legs pushing against exhaustion. He tried to shout, but his voice was weak. Still she kept going, and the walker turned its sensor toward her, its weapons shifting to aim at the fleeing girl. Adam's hand reached out, grasping the edge of his pack. He pulled out his last flare, a bright emergency beacon, and fired it directly into the sensor eye of the walker, blinding it for a moment and drawing its attention back to him. The machine roared and charged toward him, ignoring everything else. Stood fully now, bleeding, staggering but firm, and walked straight into its path, firing his last shots at the legs of the beast, shouting, not with fear, but with fury, with will, with defiance. The walker raised its arm to strike, but just then the rescue ship opened fire, its turrets sweeping the battlefield in lines of pure energy, destroying the smaller machines and forcing the walker to halt. In that second, Lyra reached the ship and its ramp open, pulling her inside, hands grabbing her, helping her up and securing the doors as the engines roared louder and the ship began to rise. Adam smiled faintly as he saw her safe. Then the ground shook beneath him and everything turned to light and fire. When the dust settled, the battlefield was silent again. Only smoke and broken metal remained. The walker lay twisted in the earth, its body torn apart by the ship's weapons, and near it, the place where Adam had last stood, was quiet. No movement, no sound, just the wind moving slowly across the valley like a breath held too long and finally released. The sky above the ship was silent now, no fire, no enemy, no threat, only the soft hum of the engines and the soft flicker of stars returning to view after the long night. Inside the ship, everything was quiet, except for the sound of breath and the gentle voice of a medic, who spoke in calming tones. Lyra sat on a cushioned seat, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale, her hands folded tightly around the small doll that she had almost lost during the escape. Her eyes kept moving toward the door of the medbay, as if expecting someone to walk through it. Every second that passed stretched longer than the last. Someone offered her food, but she shook her head. Someone tried to speak, but she didn't answer. She was waiting, and her silence was louder than anything else. She remembered the explosion behind her, the way Adam had drawn the enemy away, how he stood firm, even though he was hurt, how he had looked at her one last time before everything turned to light and smoke. She remembered running to the ship, not looking back, just as he had told her, but now sitting here, warm and safe. She wished she had looked back at least once. Far across the ship near the cargo deck, a group of soldiers worked quickly, moving broken parts and damaged supplies. A call came through on the comms, and one of them froze, then ran toward the medbay, his voice echoing down the corridor. We found him. He's alive, barely breathing, but he's alive. Lyra stood so fast the blanket fell from her shoulders. Her legs moved before her mind did, running through the corridors until she reached the med team, who were bringing in a stretcher covered in soot and blood, but still moving. Adam's chest rose and fell slowly, his face pale, his armor torn, his arm wrapped in cloth, his eyes half open as if waking from a dream. She rushed to his side and grabbed his hand, holding it tightly, as if afraid it might slip away. Adam looked at her and smiled faintly. You made it. She nodded and said, you kept your promise, he whispered. I told you I would. Then closed his eyes and let the medics do their work. The ship flew smoothly now through safe space, heading toward the Solari homeworld, where peace talks had begun again and where the Queen waited. Every hour the medics updated Lyra on Adam's condition. Slowly he was healing. The burns treated, the wounds cleaned, his strength returning bit by bit, and every time he opened his eyes, she was there sitting beside him, watching him like a silent protector. When the ship finally entered orbit around the Solari world, a message was received directly from the palace. The Queen herself was waiting at the landing site, surrounded by her guards and advisors, but she had no crown, no armor, only a mother's heart aching for the child she thought she had lost forever. The landing ramp opened slowly. And the sun of the Solari homeworld bathed everything in gold, the sky clear, the air soft and full of life. Lyra stepped forward, first her steps, unsure, her breath shaking, and then she saw her mother standing at the end of the platform, her arms open, her face filled with tears that she no longer tried to hide. Lyra ran across the platform, her feet barely touching the ground, the doll still clutched in her hand. And when she reached her mother, the world seemed to pause around them. The queen fell to her knees and held her daughter in her arms, her voice breaking as she whispered again and again, "My star, my little star. You're safe, you're really safe." Lyra cried against her shoulder, then pulled back and said, "He saved me. It was him. Not a guard, not a ship, not a machine. It was him, the human who came when no one else did." The queen looked up and saw Adam standing weakly at the top of the ramp, supported by two medics, his face bruised, but his eyes clear. She rose slowly and walked toward him, the crowd around them parting in silence. When she reached him, she did not speak right away. Instead, she knelt before him, lowering her head in a gesture of deep respect and gratitude, her hands held together as she said, "Thank you, not as a queen, but as a mother. Thank you for giving me back the light of my life." Adam shook his head slowly. "I just kept my word, that's all." She smiled and replied, "Sometimes that's more than enough." In the days that followed, news of the rescue spread across both human and Solari networks, not as a tale of war, but as a story of hope, of unity, of one man who crossed the line between two worlds to save a life. The queen declared a day of peace in his honor and invited Adam to remain on the Solari world as a guest of the royal family. Though he refused medals and rewards, he accepted the gift of rest, a home near the mountain lake where Lyra would often visit him, sometimes with questions, sometimes with stories, and sometimes just to sit beside him in silence and watch the stars rise together. She once asked him why he had really come back for her, and he had said, "Because when someone cries for help, and you hear it with your heart, not just your ears, you don't walk away." He never saw himself as a hero, never called himself brave, but to Lyra, he would always be the man who came when no one else did, the man who stood between her and the end, the man she could run to and say the words that would echo through time, "I'm safe, thanks to him." Somewhere far beyond the stars, beyond the ruins, beyond the memory of war, a quiet voice would always carry that message, reminding the galaxy that even in its darkest hour, one human with a promise and a heart full of fire could change everything. End.